to share with you some interesting concept of object-oriented programming. So there's this concept of an object, right? And we have one object and that's different from another object. And we've seen how you can have like two televisions, or at least we've read in previous sections in the chapter where you could set up and have two televisions, and both one television can be on, the other one is off, and what you do to one doesn't impact what you do to the other one. But what if we wanted to have something that was like, okay, we don't want this just to impact one instance. We want to have like one variable that we could change, that when we change that, it changes them for both at the same time. And so instead of an instance variable, that's what they call a static variable. And so a static variable is something that causes an impact across the entire, all the objects that are using that same class definition. We also have static methods, and it's a similar concept. The static methods, though, cannot impact instance variables. Anyway, a lot of fun stuff to go in and read about, a lot of fun stuff that you can go in and play with. I wanted to share with you out of Introduction to Java Programming with Daniel Liang, Chapter 9, Section 7, and we're going to go in and we're going to take a look at listing 7. So with that, let's go ahead and get cranking. I'll go ahead and share my screen so you can see what it is that I'm working with. And this is where we're going to work out of. I did want to point out the code is available at github.com/swasu/Java examples. I went ahead and made that public domain so you can have access to that. All right, just to read that paragraph again. If you want all the instances of a class to share data, use static variables, also known as class variables. Static variables store values for the variables in a common memory location. And because of this common location, if one object changes the value of a static variable, all objects of the same class are affected. Java supports static methods as well as static variables. Static methods can be called without creating an instance of the class. And so we've actually kind of seen that. Static methods like math.random, we've seen that before sometimes. Math.py is, I don't know, that's a bad example. Math.random, though, we don't have to create anything. We can just use the class math and then .random. Math.pow is another example of that. We don't actually have to create a math object. We just use the math class. So let's go down here, and they've got circle with static members, but this is being tested by this class here, the test circle with static members. So this is the one that I want to make, and we'll start with because this is what has a static void main. I'm going to call this, let's go ahead, go over to Eclipse, and let's, listing 5, by the way, I'm going to, we did not do listing 5 because listing 5 requires Java FX, and something interesting happened where Java FX is no longer a part of the Java development kit, and so played around with that. It never did work out for me. I'm sure that I could continue to poke at it and eventually could get it to go, but the thing that they're trying to show off is how to measure the distance between points in 2 dimensions, and it's just not that interesting of a program for me, so I'm not going to play with it that long. So we're going to create a new package because I like to keep everything in a package, and that's what we did here. And then I created a new class, and the class I'm just going to name Chapter 9 Listing 7. I'm going to include public static void main. And the first thing that I always like to do, make sure the thing works. It does. Oh, swing and miss. Control Z, copy it. And I also like to, when I'm playing around with new code, make sure that the code makes it all the way in. So we've got hello and we've got bye. Now, let's go over here and let's copy this. All right. So let's see what that code looks like. Control wrong button, Control A, Control I to smart indent, says print hello. Okay, that's nice. Before creating objects. All right, so circle of static members, it doesn't exist yet. So we'll go ahead and create that, and I'll lean on Eclipse to do that. It gets the name, it gets the package. It doesn't include public static void main. And I think it's just fun that it just handles all of our business for us. And we can just lean on it to do, trust it to do the right thing. I don't like what Daniel's doing here. I'm going to change this to a getter. The number of objects, I want it to be private. So this method does not exist. And so public, we'll make this an int, and we'll return this dot number of objects. Now, number of objects does not exist yet. So we need to come up here into number of objects, and the default, let's do private static int. I think lowercase? Yeah, lowercase. All right. There we go. And because it's not an instance, we can't use the this operator. We just have to use number of objects. And that the italic shows you that, hey, this one's a weird one, right? So that's all good. Before creating objects, the number of circle objects is 0. And that is kind of what we would expect, right? Let's go ahead and make a default constructor right quick. Copy this, paste that in there. This is going to be a public constructor. I'm not going to pass anything in for the default. And I'm going to say, yeah, we'll just call that good for there. All right, so that all works. That's all fine. Let's go see what the next line of code is. Hey, I don't know what you are, little person, but can I make you go away? It's interesting. There we go. All right, so now it says create circle 1. And I think I know what's supposed to happen here. So we come in, this is the one that has the main. And we've got a new. This is where I think it gets interesting. I think what we're supposed to do inside our default constructor, it's supposed to be number of objects plus plus. Will you let me get away with that? Yeah, I think you will. I think you will. Okay, so we can see that that still works. Hi, bye. Number of objects is still 0. I think they've got the print statement coming up next. My bad on the keys. Here we go. We're going to have to probably change that just a little bit since I decided to use a getter method instead. Okay. C1 radius. Okay. Let's see what we can do here. So after creating C1 dot, well, I use getters and setters for my method, so that won't work. And then get number of objects. We're going to replace that. Okay, so we still have this little red squiggle. We have to create the method get radius. Radius should be a double. And so I'll have it return and it says, hey, you know what? That doesn't exist. So private, and then we'll, it's a double, and C1, it looks like that we're not setting C1 up here. So C1 does have a radius of 1, so that probably means inside my constructor, my default constructor, I need to go ahead and say something like this dot radius equals 1.0. Okay, so let's go ahead and check that by running it. Number of circle objects is now 1, and we get by. Okay, so radius 1, number of objects 1. Radius 1, number of objects of 1. Okay. So now we'll grab this line right quick and paste it in right here. And then it's saying, hey, we don't actually have a constructor. So let's create a new constructor. The only thing I will say is this should probably be new double. I'm going to call this creation radius, and nope, wrong key, and home. There we go. Now, we still want to increment. The constructor is basically the same, so I'll just copy and paste it in constructor. The only thing is we're not going to be using a default radius anymore. We're just going to change it to be whatever we asked for the creation radius to be. Okay, so let's go back here. Let's save this. And, oh, what's it saying? The static method, get number of objects from the type, should be accessed in a static way. So it liked this better. And I think, yeah, public static int get number of objects. Yeah, this is a static method. This is a static variable, so that makes sense. Those two should be paired that way. Get radius, that makes sense. Okay, so it's mostly happy, other than C2 is not being used. Yeah, well, not yet. I'm just not there yet. Okay, so now we've got that code working. I think we've got some nice print statements to go along with it. Let's just get greedy. I'll just grab the rest of this code. It could go horribly wrong, like I admit that, but I'm optimistic. This should give us something that we can play with. Okay, so it doesn't like this, and so create getter and setter, get radius, setter and getter, yep, all good stuff. It fixes those automatically for us, and probably, yep, get radius, recognize that there. I bet we've got a new, we've already had the get radius. We did that. You can notice how that's my typing. Let's refactor this just a little bit. A little less ambiguity. I'm going to call this, let's call this next radius. So this dot radius equals next radius. Okay, minor change, not a big deal. Just makes my life a little easier. Now, this is one where I changed the method. Instead of having a, so this is saying I want to use the individual method, the individual or the instance object, and I want to directly call a variable defined in another class. I don't agree with that. And so I changed it to be a static method. In the static method, I can just call a static method using the class name dot name of the static method. And that way the data stays private. And so we do this, and we save this, and we try to run this. Okay, so the number of objects is 0. After creating C1, number of objects is 1. After creating C2 and modifying C1, radius 9, number of objects 2. C2, radius 5, number of objects 2. Yeah, that all makes sense. I'm on board with all that. And yeah, and that matches up there nicely. Okay, let's go see what else Daniel has up here in his. So he's got a variable radius. Mine is private. Let's go take a look at that and see the difference. So radius is private. And I just do that so that nobody else is messing, no other classes are messing with that. And if we decide that we want to change how radius is being handled and manipulated inside our class, we can do that without telling other people about it. Static int number of objects equals 0. Static int number of objects. I guess we can give it a default value here. Shouldn't change anything. When variables are created, they're given a default value of 0, but we'll go ahead and make it 0. And then here's Daniel with the default constructor, and the default constructor does have a radius of 1. We can see we've got the same thing. And then he's got a constructor that allows us to set a radius. And yep, we see we've got the same thing here. And then get number of objects. And static int get number of objects. Static int get number of objects, and this is actually public. Okay, and then we've got return the area. We're actually not calculating area anywhere. Let's just modify our code right quick so that we can do this. Okay, so C2 dot set radius. Just to make my math easy, I'm going to set the radius as 10, and then I'm going to do let's use printf. It's been a while since I've played with that. I mean, things could possibly go horribly wrong, but circle with radius, and let's do, I think it's %d. I get these wrong from time to time, and I'm okay with that. We can readjust. It'll be a good learning experience. %d has area, and I think I'll do %d again, and then \n, and then comma, and we'll go this dot radius. Radius, comma, C2 dot get area. Now, get area currently doesn't exist, so let's go get that knocked out right quick. Create the method, and you should return a double. And we're not using the do statements today. I'll get rid of that. And 2, or no, I'm sorry, pi r squared. So we'll do math dot pi times math dot how, and I'll do this dot radius 2. Okay, so that should be get area. Run this puppy. Oh, where have I gone wrong? Remember when I said this could go all end in tiers? Let's try F. Yeah, there we go. So let's format this a little bit. Let's do .2, and over here I'll do .3. And so as you can see, now this limits the output to have 2 decimal places, which is the .2. There it is. And this one is limited to 3, which is the .3. And so we can just have a nice little formatted printer. By the way, Pi is 3.14159 dot, 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 right? 10 times 10 is 100. 100 times 3 is about 300. So yeah, that's cool. That'll work. All right, friends. Let's just take a look at our code one more time, see if there's anything we can tidy up. Leave my print statements in here because they do make sense to me, and it shows where we start and where we end. I'll space this out just a little bit more. Control A, Control I. Yeah, we had a few things that we could indent there. Since those are separate lines, I'm going to go ahead and space them just a little bit more, make them a little bit easier for me to read. That's one idea right there. Okay, I'll split that to make that easier to read. That's a different idea. That's all the same idea. Okay, so I'll call that good. Let's see if there's anything we can tidy up over here. No, all that looks pretty good. Anyway, the fun thing is now we've got this. Now I've got a static method. I've got a static number of objects, and that basically allows us to do something with, when we do something for one object, we're doing something for every object that is touched by that class. So, all right, friends. Well, that was hopefully interesting, hopefully fun. I always enjoy the discussion with static variables. It's a different way of thinking about things, and it's one of those things. One of the terrible injustices is that sometimes we learn programming from a book or from looking at somebody else's examples, and so we don't necessarily get to go out and explore the world and think about, okay, how could this be used and things like that. And so I think there's a lot of fun that can be had with static variables that we don't get to enjoy or we don't get to experience when we stick to just the textbook examples. And so I'm going to imagine that there's probably a storied past to why this was necessary. And I actually don't know that history. And so that would be something I'd like to go learn more about. And I would also encourage you to go learn more about. And I find a lot of the things that we can do in Java, like why do we need something that is public versus private and ideas like this? I'm guessing there's a good reason for it. And I'm guessing there's a lot of fun stories behind that. And a lot of the things that we have that we take for granted today, like integrated development environments, higher level languages, compilers, things like that. A lot of those things we just take for granted. But to get to where we are, it was a long and probably storied battle. So these things didn't just happen magically, and there was obviously a need for it. So it's something now that we have access to. Anyway, like I said, a lot of fun. I hope you all enjoyed this. I look forward to sharing more ideas with you on Java programming later and just basic general programming. Anyway, thank you again. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Have a wonderful day, and here's to pleasant programming.